In good police training, there is a thing that was first described to me as a ladder of force. And I guess among instructors in police academies, it is called a use of force continuum. Let me show you what it looks like. Uh, Got it to work that time. Okay, this is the use of force continuum. And what it refers to for police purposes is different options for using force by a police officer that are supposed to be guided by the amount of force that they see in front of them and the situational factors that determine threat of harm to other people, to the officer, and to the person who is perceived to be the problem. So this is a continuum, meaning it's a dimension or a variable that runs from the mere presence of an officer on the scene up to the use of deadly force. And in between, there are intermediate levels. Verbal direction means the officer talking in such a way as to de-escalate the situation. Usually that's done by talking in a calm voice, using the other person's first name if possible, emphasizing to the other person what they have to gain by backing out of this threatening situation, and so on. Then there are different methods of empty hand control. This is where officers may use skills that have been developed in martial arts training or in physical skills for controlling subjects that they're dealing with. At my gym, I see a lot of police officers working out regularly to maintain the physical strength that is needed for some of these intermediate measures. Then there is what's called an intermediate weapon here, use of mace or a baton. These are weapons, but they are not firearms. And then deadly force usually means firearms. We've seen a trend in the news, especially in the last few years, where people have phones and they can make video records of police behavior. There's a disturbing number of those videos that show officers arriving on a scene and immediately shooting somebody using deadly force as a first resort rather than as a last resort. And that's disturbing. This culture has a lot of guns. Not only police are armed, but many non-police civilians, citizens are armed. Some states permit people to carry guns in public. There are so many different versions of that category of law. I'm not familiar with all of them. There are concealed carry laws, for example. So it is true that when officers encounter a tense situation, one that seems to be already violent or poses the threat of violence, there is a tendency to assume that guns might be involved and to be prepared to use deadly force going in. That's really unfortunate because most of these other intermediate levels on the use of force continuum require not only a knowledge of how to use the techniques, but also courage. And most officers, I think, go into law enforcement with the aim of um, being strong protectors of the community and doing good, and their intentions may be fine, but they need to realize that in confronting threatening situations, courage is needed. And the use of guns right away can't become a substitute for courage. In the police academy, we need to be training up courage. Martin Luther King, in training up his nonviolent followers, put courage as principle number one. The first principle of nonviolence is that a nonviolent approach takes courage. Of course, in that approach to problem solving, you're not going to rely on guns. That's not going to come into the picture. So you are going to be using mostly your presence in demonstrations. You're going to be using your words in speeches. The trained marshals who are part of a nonviolent march or demonstration may also use some empty hand control techniques, because marshals often have to keep their own comrades in line as the demonstration proceeds. But that's about as far as it goes with nonviolent demonstrations, and there is training for that. Well, there has to be training for those levels of the use of force continuum among police as well. As police become more heavily armed, it appears anyway that there is more and more temptation to use weapons and to circumvent all the other levels of this continuum, just to jump over them and to shoot first and ask questions later, which is a terrible way to serve and protect the community. In nonviolence, the first step of problem solving is information gathering. And when a police officer appears on the scene, the first thing they need to do is size it up. And part of that step of information gathering is doubting your first impression, because often people present themselves to you in a way that is meant to be misleading for their own purposes. So it's essential to adopt nonviolent tactics as part of the approach to any problem, whether you are empowered to use weapons or not on any level of this continuum. So it's rather frustrating to see those examples, but it highlights a need for training that is very urgent, because there's a great deal of bias in the way deadly force is used in these situations. We have data on that, and we don't want this to be another example of police serving and protecting one part of the community by killing and maiming another part of the community. In just war theory, which I've done a couple of other videos on, the principle of proportionality says that in military operations, only the amount of force should be used that is proportional to the problem that is trying to be solved. On the police side, this is what I've described as a breakdown in the principle of proportionality, as defined by that just war tradition. So there's an issue here that I think we should all care about. I've done a little training with police. I have police officers who have been partners in some of the training that I've done. And I've also worked in juvenile corrections quite a bit. I kind of understand the mindset of people in professions whose job includes the use of force. But it's in those professions that I think the nonviolent toolkit of skills and attitudes and emotional equipment is needed most urgently. And I think some of the most effective officers that I know understand that. When I go in to do a training, for example, in a correctional facility with staff, the people who get it right away, the people who understand what nonviolence training is all about, are usually the ones that have had some training in the martial arts, where thinking and sizing up situations and using responses that are appropriate but not excessive is part of the training. So I think there's an important issue here. I hope you will think about it. And I hope you will like the video and subscribe to the channel, because that helps me to do more of this. Thank you very much. Until next time.